Live to the planet.
Planet, are you listening?
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com proudly presents
David Waldman.
Or Kagro.
Or X.
Or Kagro X.
Let's just call him David.
So listen up. Here's David Waldman. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show.
Good morning. How you doing? You can't see it on the radio, but my chair is empty. Oh my God. Clint Eastwood, thank you for your stunt yesterday. You have made it possible for Democrats to keep loving you regardless of your endorsement, if you can call it that, of Mitt Romney. Unbelievable. No Hollywood flake has ever flaked so hard for so many. And in such a short period of time. Wow. Train wreck of a convention from start to finish, and the finish was unbelievable. Clint Eastwood flakes out on national television, on every network, for God only knows how long he was up there going bonkers. I mean, even before the chair entered into the picture, the speech was rambling and unfocused and unintelligible. And then the chair. An explosion. Twitter never blew up so fast. I've never seen it move like that. Wow. And, I mean, there was an invisible Obama account within minutes. Clint Eastwood's chair that was an account. Unbelievable. By the time I went to bed, I stayed up a little late, as I sometimes do. But before I went to bed, Eastwooding, #Eastwooding, was a thing. It existed. People across the country were taking pictures of themselves pointing at empty chairs and putting it up on Instagram and Flickr and God only knows what other photo hosting things they were using. The world went crazy. Just the small corner of the world that watches such things, of course. 90% of the world had no idea that this was going on. 90% of America didn't care that it was going on. But when they woke up, the morning news was like, hey, how you doing, everybody? Here's the weather. Crazy man spoke at the Republican National Convention yesterday, and I'm not even talking about anybody who was running for office. I'm talking about Clint Eastwood. Did you see Clint Eastwood? Oh, my God. Everybody was talking about it. WTOP, the Washington, D.C. all-news station where you turn for traffic and weather on the 8s, right? Your standard every day. Just give me the rundown of the news. What was the baseball scores and how much traffic is there in my way? Reports the story this way. My wife called from the car to say, she's laughing. They get on WTOP News and they're going to give you the world news headlines, right? And what do they say? Mitt Romney accepts the Republican nomination. Dramatic pause. And Clint Eastwood talks to a chair. Ha ha, chuckles, laughing. Bounce, erased. That's it. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what the data says. I mean, it's entirely possible that people who you poll will give you a different answer. And I would say it's unfair probably to say bounce, erased, because the two things won't have anything to do with it. As we know, people are tribal voters. We've been talking about for a long time. People probably told pollsters. Nobody, I don't think, changed their minds about who they're voting for based on this insane chair incident. And probably not even that many people changed their minds about who they were voting for based on anything, any part or whole of this convention. What I mean by bounce erased is nobody's talking about the candidate. Nobody's talking about the bounce. Nobody's talking about, hey, we should be giving Romney a second look. They're talking, if they're talking at all about the convention, they're talking about, did you see that weird chair thing? Have you heard about Eastwooding? Did you think they should take him away for his own good? Whatever. I mean, what a wind up for the show. And it was right in the heart of prime time. Eastwood, Rubio, who gave a very Chris Christie-like speech in that it was mostly about how fantastic the speaker was and not the person who he was there to support. And of course, Rubio had been given the honor of introducing Mitt Romney for his acceptance speech, and still he didn't really have much to say about Mitt Romney. So crazy chair guy, everybody's, head slapping, face palming over this thing, and then Marco Rubio gets up and he looks like he's 12, and he thinks that Fidel Castro was in the chair next to him. The chair had been removed at that point, but invoking Fidel Castro, really, Rubio has to do that. Excuse me. Rubio has to do that, as you know. Whether he personally escapes Castro's regime or not, or leaves several years before his family, I think, left Cuba. There's some controversy about that. Invoking something that parochial, and that really is what it is. It's a national issue, Cuba, yes, but honestly, it's Cuban Americans who think about that. They were in Florida. They had that going for them. He, of course, Cuban, he's from Florida, so he's entitled, but I might have scheduled him differently, or said, if you want this spot, let's keep the Castro stuff to a minimum. Not that, maybe for the Republican crowd, it's a good thing to invoke Castro because he's an enemy and everyone can jeer at him. But that just seemed kind of petty for the guy who's going to speak before Mitt Romney. But then crazy guy, self-centered guy, and then the next president of the United States, crazy self-centered guy, comes on. But of course he had been softened up for the night, humanized. They ran another humanization subroutine earlier in the evening, and it worked pretty well. In the sense, in the real sense, not the, well, that's a lie, but it worked, or was it effective? It was a very good job. The best speakers they had for the night were the regular people who just happened to be friends of the Romneys. And that's okay. Of course, people have friends. And we were trying to find out how he relates. So we talked to people he related to. It doesn't invalidate it that they were friends of Romneys. That's the point. And they were, in many cases, I don't know what you would call them, fellow worshippers. They're not parishioners, per se, but people who attended the same Mormon church in Massachusetts as the Romneys. Very touching stories about how he had impacted their lives directly and in very admirable ways, fantastically admirable ways. He helped one family take care of their terminally ill son. Really touching story. There was things you could answer to. The woman was talking about, she apparently, Mitt Romney helped her terminally ill son prepare his will. So very touching, tear-jerking story, and a good one. And she said, how many people do you know how many grown men do you know who would take time out of their busy schedules to help a terminally ill boy put his affairs in order? And it is a good question, although I honestly, answered straight up, I'd say any decent human being, if he was asked a question, I made a request of like that by a terminally ill boy, should take some time out and help them. But it was, Mitt Romney's not your everyday guy. That's sort of been the point all along, but it was a very big deal, and it was a very good story, and people liked it. The delegates loved it. The Romneys should have loved it. It was everything they wanted. Even, those of us who were watching with a critical eye said, that's nice. Or at least that's a sad story, and I feel. And that's the point. I feel. For the first time, people are talking about Mitt Romney, and I have a feeling. And it's not, I'm not laughing or I'm not repulsed. I've never been repulsed, really, by Mitt Romney. But he tells me nothing. But this was a good story, and there were more of them, and that worked. It was very nice. So I am glad of it. You know what? I have them from Connecticut popping up on my screen. What does that mean? Greg Dworkin calling in. Greg, hi. How you doing? How are you today?
Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning. I'm all right. It looks like your notification popped up in a way that makes me think that my phone lines, my call-in lines are not connected, and it looks like something went wrong with that. So I'll have to connect that later. You'll all hear about it. But let's talk data. Let's talk conventions. Let's talk feelings and things that we have not yet been able to measure. And let's talk about shares a little bit.
Oh, let's talk about shares.
Why don't we?
Brendan Nyhan tweeted a lovely picture, which is from the Hall of Fame, I think. It's an old Simpsons picture of a faded newspaper headline with a picture, old man yells at chair. I think that Simpsons are great for predicting the future, as Brendan points out. That was kind of bizarre.
It was.
I have to say. Now, let's step back and look at the whole convention, the convention as a whole. We have one night, which is immediately disrupted by Isaac,
right?
Which is lost. And then we have the second night, which has a decent Ann Romney speech, for a political spout. I think it was a pretty good speech. And, doesn't completely do the job of humanizing Mitt, because that's not fair to Ann. It's just too big a job for any one speech to do. But unfortunately, it's immediately stepped on by Chris Christie's All About Me speech, which essentially sends the vibe that, okay, so if it doesn't work out this year, there's always me next time around. The following day is Paul Ryan's Lies. And I have just a little collection here of actual news media headlines I want to read to you.
Please.
How the media soft plays Paul Ryan's Lies, factual shortcuts, perceived inaccuracies, questionable claims. That one's from Media Matters, trying to track the euphemisms that media goes through when they try to jump hoops and not call a lie. But that's not true for everybody. I have the following. The true, the false, and the misleading. Grading Paul Ryan's convention speech. Paul Ryan repeats auto bailout Medicare lies. Paul Ryan, a lie is a lie is a lie. Michael Tomasky on Paul Ryan's convention speech and his web of lies. The lies and lies and lies of Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan's large lies and one big truth. I mean, these people were talking for a whole day about the fact that Ryan exaggerated the truth to the point where he actually not only didn't help Mitt Romney, he may well have damaged his own brand a little bit, because he unfairly had the reputation as a straight-shooting, will tell you the hard truths kind of guy, just like John McCain was the straight-shooter, speak from the hip reputation, which, of course, was completely undeserved. And this speech that he gave actually had a puncturing effect, because it's really hard to pull that off. He's not the icon he was before he spoke, which is really a remarkable thing. And then we move into today, and just as you were saying, a huge mistake by the convention people by putting Clint Eastwood in a spot which would have been better served either by the video, which would have been my choice, or the wonderful real families that you mentioned. I think it's a tough spot to put real people in a 10 p.m.
Yes.
Everybody in the country watching when you've never done this before situation. Yeah. It's one thing to talk to the people in the hall, which is hard enough for people not used to public speaking. And I know that you and I have had some practice sessions with, shall we say, with public speaking. And it's not easy. It's not as easy as it looks. And as wonderful as they were, and as genuine as they were, and as powerful as it was, I don't know that it would have been fair to them to put them in that 10 o'clock slot. It would have been great if they pulled it off, don't get me wrong, but just in fairness to them, I think the video would have been a much, much better choice. And the talk this morning is how Ann Romney was aghast, and, just trying to apologize as best as can for the fact that Clint Eastwood was very bizarre.
He was.
Now, the best thing you could say about Eastwood is that it wasn't political, so it's not going to hurt Romney. Yeah. But what it did do is it spoiled the whole narrative of the convention, which is supposed to build on each day and then make a gauzy, emotional appeal to the viewer about, what's happening. And then Mitt comes on and he gives what I think everybody agrees is a workmanlike speech. It wasn't great. I heard people this morning on Chuck Todd and my friend Charlie Cook were talking about how he did. And it was okay speech. It was a good speech. And Chuck Todd did some interviewing of people close to the Romney campaign and basically said, for Romney, this was a great speech. That's as good as it gets. He can't do any better than this. And I think that's right.
Well,
he can't do any better than this.
Okay. That's probably true.
So you step back and say, okay, well, as a whole, did the convention work? Well, here's where the polling comes in. Here's the meaningless poll number of the day that I want to bring to your attention. Some polling is important, some is meaningless. They're all interesting, don't get me wrong. But here's a great meaningless polling point of the day. And this is Pew Research from last week, which asked, what about your interest in the party convention? It turns out that for the Republican convention, the public says 44% is interested and 55% not interested. For the Democratic convention, 43% say they're interested, 57% say not interested. Not surprising there, because you already know who the nominee is, and you know something about him after watching him for the last 4 years. And when you compare it to previous conventions, the Republican one I think is quite interesting, meaningless but interesting. In 2012, the number was 44. In 2000, a year they won, it was 34. Okay. So the interest doesn't necessarily correlate with who's going to win, and this is that whole riff that you and I have talked about in terms of trying to use enthusiasm as a guesstimate of whether they're likely voters. Not so much, you could not necessarily be interested and still go and vote because, a non-interested vote and a unenthusiastic vote counts as much as an enthusiastic vote. In 2008, it was different. I mean, there you were talking about the first African-American candidate potential president. And so if you compare the convention in 2008, there was 59% interest, whereas now it's 43. The Republican side had John McCain and Sarah Palin. That was a 48, whereas this year it's a 44. So if you're just comparing intra-party, no question about the fact that this is not 2008 for the Democrats, but for the Republicans, there's actually a little bit less interest now than there was in 2008, and then couple that with the fact that the networks are simply not covering the conventions as much. You're not getting your 3 hours every night. It's truncated, and therefore all the good stuff that you were describing just a few minutes ago doesn't get on the air and people don't see it.
It was. Yeah, well, the whole thing really just strikes me as a mess, and the idea that people aren't as interested as you and I is also very important to keep in mind. And I'm struck by the fact that the interest numbers were in the 30s in 2000. That's pretty amazing. But I guess we're sort of, maybe 40s is now the standard. I can understand. I remember, while Sarah Palin was still popular and not yet sort of exposed for what she was, the higher numbers there make a whole lot of sense. I don't know I'm not even sure what means, or what's causing things to linger in the 40s at this point, except that maybe people are just used to saying, oh yeah, I'm interested in who becomes president of the United States. But that's a very different perspective on enthusiasm, interest in the race. And does that, I don't know, you would think that those numbers wouldn't diverge as much, but...
Well, the fact is that people are kind of ticked off at everybody these days. And, congressional approval is at an all-time low, and people are not necessarily happy with where the country is right now. We have some pretty low right track, wrong track numbers, and there's not a lot of faith that politicians can fix it. And so it's not surprising that those numbers are a little bit down. That doesn't necessarily translate as who is going to win. I do have some other numbers to tell you about, which I thought were kind of interesting. For example, there is one, Nate Silver's latest forecast actually has Obama's numbers going up a little bit. And that mostly has to do with the fact that there are some pretty decent numbers coming out on the economic front. When Nate Silver puts his forecast together, it isn't just based on the polls, it's also based on economics. And actually, income for individuals is growing faster than you might expect given the steady state of the economy. In July, income grew at an annualized rate of 3.7, and for the year it looks like 4.2. That's actually a pretty decent number compared to the past couple of years. And also personal consumption expenditures, how much people spend, because consumer spending is 70% of the gross domestic product. Mm-hmm. And compared to other years, we're up to about 5% growth. So those actually helped the forecast. And right now, Obama has a 71.6% chance of winning. More to the point of how the convention itself is going, it's too early to look at polling numbers, really. We'll talk about an Ipsos poll if we have a moment, but I'm looking at in-trade in the Iowa electronic market because these are more or less contemporary daily polls. There has been no bounce for Romney on the in-trade numbers. In fact, today Obama's at 56.7, and he is actually... The Ryan speech made Obama's numbers go up a little bit, so it's it bounced around by a point or two, but no obvious bounce for Romney there. Iowa electronic market, Obama's at 0.599. He started at 0.590 on 8/26. So I wouldn't say that there's an Obama bounce in either of those two markets, but there's certainly no Romney bounce there.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. We have another couple of days before we see Nate Silver's projection that if Romney isn't ahead by 4 points by Monday or Tuesday, then it's been a less than expected bounce. And then the Democratic convention, of course, is going to come right on the heels, and then we'll see where we're at.
All right. Oh, so but it's what Nate is looking for is that his numbers have improved by 4 points, right? Not a 4 point.
Well, he should be 4 points ahead.
Oh.
If he's not 4 points ahead,
all right,
then he didn't do as well as expected.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
Or put it a different way. Usually Gallup says there's a 5 point bounce. Romney was a point behind, so he should be 4 points ahead. That's the simple man's way of figuring out what Nate did.
Okay. And I'm a simple man when it comes to figuring out what Nate's doing. So, okay, thanks very much. That's the picture that we're looking at, and it's going to be, an interesting couple of days to see what happens. Having the Democratic convention come right on the heels of this, this is really a great lead-in for the Democratic convention. It was supposed to end on that big up note for Republicans, the crescendo to, they were going to break out of Tampa and take the country by storm, and instead the thing fell flat. Romney's speech, like you said, was okay. It was workmanlike. There was nothing wrong with it, but it got deflated before he even took the stage, which is, bad stage management for whoever's fault that is. I don't know, but it's true. People will disregard Eastwood's whatever that was. I was going to say speech. I can't even really say it that way, as non-political. And it is non-political. It certainly doesn't impact anything. Even watching people say, well, if you can't manage your convention, how are you going to, well, I don't know. I'm not certain that anybody really thought that there was that much at risk. I'm sure beforehand people thought, well, he can handle himself. He's a big famous actor. And the fact that it was a total flop is like, well, that's an unfortunate PR, side effect. It shouldn't affect the policy. So we will see. I'm sure that when the polling shakes out, people will say, yeah, that has no effect on who I'm going to vote for. It's just a matter of what's the chatter afterwards. Have you seen the Twitter index, the Twitter political index for today?
I haven't. I don't generally pay too much attention to it during the conventions because it's supposed to look hugely in the favor of whoever is the guy.
That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, my goodness. I hadn't looked at it since yesterday. Actually, Romney's down 14 points since yesterday. So he actually hit his peak the day prior, the day before he spoke, when he was at 60 and Obama was 32. But this morning, Romney's at 46 and Obama's at 28.
Yeah.
So it looks like his bounce is already fading, probably, according to this, due to the performance of yesterday. So that's not very encouraging for him, whatever that means.
Yeah, I thought it might be like that, and I didn't know for sure. But really, after your acceptance speech, the Twitter Political Index is a young thing, so I don't know that I wouldn't say I could pick things out with any expertise, but I would expect that after your acceptance speech at a nationally televised convention that's covered by all the major networks, plus C-SPAN and all the cable news outlets, that if you came out of there with less than a 70, you have some kind of problem going on. And
well, I don't know whether it's 70 or 60. I will say this. If the night before you go in with a 60, and if you had put the video or the family who was persuasive about Romney being a good guy in that spot instead of an empty chair, or a guy talking to an empty chair, or the chair talking to the guy, I'm still not clear on that.
The chair recognized the gentleman from
California. You might have gotten a
California.
much better look, but it's a bounce, and so the bounce is starting to fade. It matches IEM, it matches Intrade, and so in that sense, it's just another data point. But I agree. I'm surprised it went down. I would have expected it to start going down tomorrow, not today.
That's the big thing. Is the bounce? I guess what you would see in a bounce in whatever the Twitter political index is, you would see the peak of that curve today, not yesterday. That's one thing that's wrong with this. I think it should be higher because the whole thing is a celebration of how fantastic your nominee is. And a lot of people drop the ball on boosting him. Chris Christie and Marco Rubio talk mostly about themselves, and that maybe it can't be avoided because you're talking about politicians and they've all got the ego, but a well-managed convention will do that, and you'll get the peak tonight. The whole thing is supposed to be a crescendo, and it didn't work. And there's if you slip on what should have been the fourth night, but was instead the third, because they got their first night blown out by a hurricane, you've misfired. And it's very interesting. I also think, certainly the other result that you would expect would be that the other party's nominee does very poorly that day, and that appears to have been the case, down in the 20s for Obama, whereas he has been, on a good day, he's been up in the 70s range.
Well, he hasn't, to be fair, he hasn't really been all that high. He has a lot more peaks than Romney does. That is true.
It is not sustained by any means.
But he hasn't really been consistently up in the 70s. He's been consistently in the 40s and 30s, and usually whatever in a non-event kind of situation, where if it's just a normal day, he's 1 or 2 points ahead, maybe 5 points ahead of Romney, so the curves go up and down together as people talk. Obama usually leading, but he's not up there in the 60s or 70s most of the time.
No, there was the first couple of times that
it's been closer to 30s and 40s. So I think that's the baseline.
The first couple of times that we went to the political index, I think was an anomaly, but he was doing very well, and Romney happened to be doing
It was his
poorly.
birthday, and so people talked about that. That's the kind of thing that will affect chatter. And so that's why you have to look at the whole month's worth of stuff rather than an individual day.
Absolutely, and I'm not even sure that it tells us anything. Even if you look at a month, a Twitter chatter index, as you've pointed out, is not really based on anything in particular, except it measures some interest.
But it does help to tell you that on the whole, people are saying a few more positive things about Obama than Romney, which matches the favorable index you get from the polls. Hey, here's a poll which is kind of interesting. This is something put out by ABC and Langer Associates. Gary Langer is their pollster. And he makes the case that 1 in 4 registered voters may be persuadable in the 2012 presidential election. We've been looking at the low number of undecideds, but just because you're decided doesn't mean that you can't change your mind. So he's not looking at decided or undecided or how you lean. He's looking at whether or not you are persuadable.
Okay.
And, of course, the people who are following closely are not. People who have strong feelings about the Tea Party are not persuadable. People who have strong sentiments about either Obama or Paul Ryan are not persuadable. But there are people who are. They're usually a little bit younger. And there's more persuadable people in the Midwest, whereas the Northeast pretty much has made up their mind. It's kind of interesting and matches what your gut feeling might be about what's happening here. And finally, at the end of my segment, I just want to bring up a really terrific report that Greg Sargent put together on the Plumb Line this morning. I'll bring your attention to.
Okay.
Which is summarizing a New York Times Jim Rutenberg report about why Obama swing voters stick with him. And basically, to put it in the gauzy analogies that are so common at conventions, people, in order to get rid of Obama, you're not looking to fire him the way Romney likes to do. You have to divorce him. Because there's an emotional bond with the president, and that's the way you have to think about it, and people just have a tough time doing that. Now, what's happening, in addition to that, and explaining the persuadable voter, and it's Greg Sargent that gave me the link to this poll that I just told you about, He also talks about the fact that the Obama campaign is going to try and escalate attacks on Romney's dishonesty based on all the stuff that we've been talking about, that the Ron Fournier piece about the welfare ads being dishonest and all those news headlines that I read to you is opening up the door to push the media a little bit to be a little bit more tough on the Obama-Romney campaign. And so there's going to be a push to do that, and we'll see how well it works. And in his example, I'm going to quote your friend and mine, one of our favorite people, Thomas Mann. The Romney campaign has, as is strikingly evident at the Tampa convention, broken new ground in its brazen and cynical disregard for the truth. As you pointed out, nobody paid attention to him and Norm Ornstein when he said that a couple months ago. And let's see whether or not it has more traction with the context now of a whole bunch of other people saying the same thing.
Yes, well, I hope so. It's unfortunate he didn't get as much attention, or at least it didn't stick for as long as I had hoped it would. And I hope that they'll bring it back up, and maybe the lame duck congressional session and fiscal cliff shakedown would be a good time for them to remind everybody of what they had said earlier on. Maybe the timing was just wrong. We'll see. I hope so. And I hope that the narrative that's growing in the media also sticks, and that these guys will call this stuff out when it happens. It's, there's a very big spin machine working in the other direction. There are even people out there, it turns out, who are talking up the Clint Eastwood appearance and saying it was awesome and is is the deal breaker for Obama. This is it. America is ready to switch because of how awesome and compelling that rambling, mumbled speech was. Very, as I always say, very interesting. That's about all I can say.
There is an iconic picture that has been floating around for a while of a chair where you only see Obama's head over the top of it because he's very tall, and the chair on the back has the little placard that says President of the United States. Right. And so that the picture's floating around with the caption, "This chair is occupied." Yep. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not thinking Clint Eastwood is going to win the election for Romney, but that's my report for today, and I'll wait further instructions from you as to how you and I will communicate next Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever the day is.
All right. Well, we'll check on your availability and make sure that we match things up right. I think we'll probably talk in the morning as usual, and we're going to try and do a morning segment, run over and do the Sirius XM show, and then try and set up for something in the evening. So if all goes well, we'll be able to talk at our regular time, and that's always a good thing.
On Tuesday, Monday being a travel day for you?
Yes, that's right. Unless you want to call me in a car, we can chat.
That's not legal in Connecticut.
Oh, right. Well, you don't have to be in the car. The seat, the chair in your car can remain empty, and you can just pretend I'm in it.
Very
How's
cool.
that?
All right. I'll talk to you next week.
That didn't make
Take
any
care.
sense. Okay, thanks very much. You too. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk again when we are in Charlotte.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Greg. Okay. So maybe now would be a good time to set up the phones again. I don't know. I did set this up earlier before I went on the air, but I must have pushed the wrong button. So please excuse the behind-the-scenes audio that I'll pick up as we go along.
Welcome
I'm calling.
to Fans FM.
Thank you.
Please enter your broadcast extension.
I will.
Followed by the pound key.
Yes, that broadcast extension is 14. See? Did you hear that? Beep, beep. 14, just like I said.
You
pound.
are now entering broadcast
1, 4.
Right.
Your line is muted. A recording will play before you go live.
That is exactly what you will hear if you want to call the show, and you call area code 617-500-7147. And then, of course, you dial that extension, as I just did. I demonstrated for you. Now I have worked this into the show. It now makes sense. This whole show, by the way, is like me talking to an empty chair. Actually, I should send out a photo of what it looks like where I'm broadcasting. I'm in a chair. I'm in a chair, obviously, but I'm actually here and you can see me if I took a picture. But I have a nice lounging type chair not far away, and it's immediately to my right. And if I point to it and take a picture, I would be Eastwooding. I could put that up. But yeah, it occurs to me that this whole show is like talking to an empty chair. I need to fill that chair. We need sidekicks on this show, and that's why it's so fun to talk to Greg. Not only do we get actually good information, but it's nice to interact. It's much more natural. You want to be that person? At least for a few minutes? Call me at 617-500-7147, then do like I did. Enter extension 14 and the pound sign, and you will enter the conference, or whatever it is that the Ann Romney bot calls it, and then I'll unmute you like this.
You are now unmuted.
Right, you'll hear that. I'm now unmuted, and I'm on the call. You can be too. 617-500-7147, extension 14, and you can tell us about why you thought Clint Eastwood was crazy, or Marco Rubio self-centered, or Mitt Romney something. He showed up too, and he gave this thing, and the balloon units were released, and that was that. That all went according to plan. That part, anyway. Yeah, the rest of it, not so much. The very interesting tweet I am pointed to. Look at this. A Breitbart nut, who, let me see, it's John Nolte, who I don't know. But it turns out if you click on his little profile, he's got lots of followers and stuff. Why? He's the editor-at-large of Breitbart News, which is sort of, oxymoronic, but whatever. So he's a Breitbart dude, one of the biggest. So he, I guess he does the big Hollywood thing. So yeah, interesting tweet for him. I'm pointed to it as the funniest tweet you'll ever see. Somebody else says. Eastwood was effing, you know what that means, in all caps this is, by the way, and with asterisks so that you don't know that he's saying that dirty F word. Eastwood was effing awesome. Finally, someone has the sand to mock Obama. That S ruled. 82 and edgier than Chris Rock. Fact. Wow. Talk about your tin ear when it comes to comedy. The rest of the country says, yargle, bargle, chargle. That was nonsense. Complete idiocy. And yet, there they are. I mean, opinions vary, let's say. But not about that. Pretty much universal that was nutty. And certainly not, ass-kicking in any sense. Pointed out to me by Dave on Twitter, DVE, with some underscores. You may know him, D_V_E, right? But we don't have any other longer name to identify him by. But I thank him for pointing it out to me because it's one of the most ridiculous tweets I'm likely to read. I can tell you that. The idea that was a win is extraplanetary. We don't even know where that could be coming from. Except that it comes from a Breitbart guy. Who else would care to do that? So that's where we are with Clint Eastwood. That's kind of what he's done for himself with that. I am sure they are aghast in the campaign. I am not of the mind to blame them for having done a poor, they certainly planned a poor finish to the convention. That's obvious. I don't think it was necessarily predictable that it was going to go that bad. And I did see, it was Jonathan Chait, I think, who tweeted one of the funnier things that I saw last night. And if I can bring it up, I'll read it verbatim. But if not, I'll paraphrase. There's an awful lot going on last night, so I have to scroll back a ways. But I think it's not too far back. Yeah, here it is. And he's imagining the backstage chatter. I don't think I'll use the teleprompter. This is Clint Eastwood talking to the stage managers. I don't think I'll use the teleprompter. Okay. And I'll need a chair. Now, you can't sit during your speech. It's not for me. Imagine that scene going on behind, okay. It's not for him. Well, and they probably thought, the guy's an actor. He's not going to get stage fright. He's used to talking to groups of people, I guess. So let's just let him go out there. If he's unscripted, he's famous. People are going to love him. You know why he's here. Let's let him go. And you forget that actors, screen actors in particular, I guess, aren't necessarily all that articulate. They have scripts. What makes a successful actor? I mean, they're able to emote that. I mean, and that's maybe even more important than the script. There are plenty of good actors who go off script and ad lib, and some of the best lines in movies are things that they threw in there, things that they thought belonged in the movie that maybe weren't even in the script, or at least, that's the way the story goes. The stuff that they ad lib that's crap, they just edit out and you never hear about it, or you see it in the blooper reel or run it during the credits as stuff that, in a comedy movie. Anyway, So I guess they sort of forgot about that, and they just let him go. And really, who would have predicted that he would have come out and done something? And even on paper, sometimes a comedy routine looks good on paper or in planning, since this never made it to paper, obviously, or the planning stage. But he can describe something to you, and you might say, well, either you laugh at it then and it doesn't work live, or you'll laugh at it or not laugh at it and say, well, maybe it'll be better than it looks. He'll be mugging it up, So I can't necessarily say that they did something irresponsible, but in hindsight, it was irresponsible. I will say that. It was stupid, and it blew him up. I've got a caller on the line. Let's check in and see who it is, and hopefully it's not Clint Eastwood, although that would make for an interesting interview at the very least. So we'll unmute the call and say, hi, caller. How you doing? Where are you calling from, and who's on the line?
I'm calling from Houston.
Houston, hi. And who's calling?
Hi. My name's Jeremiah.
Hi, Jeremiah. Okay, what's on your mind today? Did you see what went on last night?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was listening a few minutes ago, and you guys were contemplating why there wasn't about, or on the Twitter, what had happened over the past day. And I think the reason is because of Paul Ryan's speech. I think that it soured the there for people, at least on Twitter.
It very well may have. That's true. I don't think that there was really good reaction on Twitter to the speech, and it may be that. We've said from the outset, it's not very scientific, and we don't really know how Twitter skews. Although I do know that conservatives are constantly claiming that they're dominating Twitter, so you would expect, if that was the case, that their candidate would be dominating. But it may be that they just don't love their candidate a whole lot, but they love Paul Ryan a lot. So that is interesting. It may indicate that there's less Republican dominance, conservative dominance of Twitter than they think. And certainly there was no great outpouring of love in any other venue for the Ryan speech. It was pretty empty too, I thought. I don't know, what did you think of it personally?
I turned it off about 10 minutes before it was finished, because it just frustrated me, the fact that it was just full of lies. It made me sort of upset, and I just turned the TV off.
Well, okay, I think that was probably the reaction. I think it was shared with you by a lot of people. I was professionally interested in it, and we'll call it that. As rarely the case. I usually don't even watch even Democratic conventions. They're just not the sort of thing I'm typically interested in watching. I'm more interested in watching people watch it via Twitter. But I thought I should, catch it and have my own reactions. But even fans of Paul Ryan, I think, thought that it left something to be desired. So it is entirely possible that he ended up taking some of the wind out of the sails. And then I think the plan always is for a convention to have such a big and rousing closing night that you would expect if you lose ground between the night before closing and the closing night in Twitter chatter or anywhere else, I think you're doing it wrong, is the phrase. And I guess that's an indication that they've got some work to do. But I'll bet you're right that the Ryan speech really didn't deliver the punch they thought it was going to. And it may have been the case that no matter what they did tonight, they just weren't going to recover. Also, it's possible that there's just maybe these conventions are too long and there's just convention fatigue, which would not augur well for the Democrats if the same crowd is watching. We will see. But a good point, I think. Thanks for bringing it up, Jeremiah. Are you a Daily Kos user, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Are you a Daily Kos community member? Are you a user that people might want to know what your username is or something like that?
I'm more of an observer.
That's fine.
I just created an account for the first time the other day.
Oh, great. Well, welcome. No pressure, but we'd love to have you hang around. I always ask just because sometimes people like to, give each other sort of online high fives for showing up on the radio too. But I think it's fantastic that there are so many people joining, and a lot of people who don't necessarily jump into the conversation online, but find the radio an interesting outlet. So I'm measuring that. I don't mean to put anybody on the spot when I ask that. And of course, even if you are a Daily Kos user and you don't want to give your username, that's okay too. But welcome then, and thanks for calling. Hope you'll stick around. Okay. Thanks for the call. I've got another caller on the line, and let's go over to that one. And I'll punch all the right buttons here. Unmuting the next caller. And hi, caller. You're on the air. Who's calling and where from?
Benjamin from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, Benjamin. Raleigh. Okay, so we're on our way to your state next.
Yeah, we're looking forward to my brother lives down in Charlotte, so I'm getting the blow-by-blow down here so far. They're getting psyched up.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting. I think Obama's got a lot to work with after this Republican convention.
He did.
But one thing I haven't heard, and I enjoy your show a lot.
Thank you.
One thing that I haven't heard people talking much about, maybe you covered it earlier this morning and I didn't hear it, was Romney and his tribute to Neil Armstrong, his praise or his saying how one of the greatest to paraphrase, one of the greatest American achievements was putting a man on the moon.
Yeah.
But that was like a huge public works project.
Yes.
It seems like just the kind of government spending to achieve something that, a private firm could never have done and has never done since.
Yes, that's true.
As American taxpayers working together, putting their money into that government program.
Yeah, one of the last great ones.
That. And there was I'm like, hello, if it was under Romney instead of John Kennedy, Democrat, it would never have happened.
Not likely.
Am I right? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, I think you're right. But here's what's interesting to me about it is, I guess that it may be impossible to predict for a number of reasons. I mean, right now it would never happen. It would never happen because of the fiscal situation, which because Republicans are also calling for austerity on top of all of this, you would guess they would never do it. But on the other hand, there they are, pointing it out as one of the greatest achievements in American history. And so you wonder, well, why wouldn't you want to have one of the greatest accomplishments, one of the greatest achievements of American history happen under your watch? And it is possible. I mean, certainly that's what, let's say, George Bush's administration thought they were going to do. They knew, we were in dire straits financially then too, and they said, we'll spend any amount in order to, have what they thought was going to be one of the greatest accomplishments in American history, and instead was a giant debacle for the most part, and we'll spend all we need to do.
The Iraq War.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when it comes to their wanting to do something big and costly, if they think it's going to be great or inure to their benefit in some way, they forget about the debt. They put it aside and they go ahead and do those things. Now, something that just doesn't aggrandize them personally, like maybe the moon landing, they might not do. Although certainly they would have no trouble trying to grab credit for it. And right. Nixon certainly did. There's no shortage of photo ops of him greeting the returning hero astronauts. And you all remember, of course, that the astronauts went and started a super PAC to complain about how much credit Nixon was taking for it, just like they did with Obama. But my guess is no, we would not see something like that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't mean to step on you. Go ahead. Do you want to add some more to the?
No, I was just gonna say that, that for me, that was the outstanding, the thing that stood out to me the most from the convention was the hypocrisy, where, everywhere that I looked, like Bobby Jindal there, up in New Orleans,
right,
begging for federal funds to help out the people with the storm, which I think is a legitimate role of government. I fault him for asking for money for that purpose, but if there hadn't been a storm, he would have been, at the convention talking about the evil ways of the government spending money.
Yeah.
It just seems as though the Republicans are all against government spending unless it's on their pet projects.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. They're against spending on anything but the things that they think are good ideas or necessitate spending. And in that case, they don't talk about the spending at all. They never say, I got X amount of money and put it into this. They just say sort of, I made it happen. Or, sometimes there's a press release about the size of the check that they're getting. But, yeah, they don't seem to care, and it doesn't bother them.
And I'll leave you because I know you've got other callers. The one other thing, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is it Iglesias, Matt Iglesias?
Oh, Iglesias. Probably. The writer, Iglesias.
Yeah.
Matt Iglesias, yes.
He had a very interesting column, I don't know if you've seen it, about the way that Romney was talking about the value of his wife and how he credited her work at home as being more important than his own, and contrasting that with what are his and the Republican Party's actual plans to make life more difficult for working women, contrasting them with what the Obama administration would do. So if you have a chance to check that out, I'd recommend it.
Okay.
But I'll let you go. I've got more other callers, and I really enjoy listening to your show.
I enjoyed having your call. Thanks very much. And, yeah, maybe we'll see you hanging around at Charlotte. Hope so.
I'll give you a call. I'll give you a call once Charlotte starts, because a bunch of my pals are going to be there. I'm not going to make it, but a bunch of my pals are, so I might be able to give you a first-hand perspective.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for your call.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. It's a good point. I have not seen Matt Iglesias's latest, or at least the column that you're talking about. That may no longer be the latest. He's got a large output. Matt does. And finally, I'm able to actually know the pronunciation of somebody's last name, so I feel good about that. That's nice. And it's an excellent point, and a lot of other people, I think, have probably observed it as well. There's that sort of stock pat hokum of a line that, a lot of candidates will deliver, talking about, of course, the importance of homemaking in American life, and of course it is important, but it's sort of it strikes you as weird when a candidate like, especially a religious conservative will say, like he's going out of his way I gotta find something that makes it sound like I value women and their contribution to society. And of course, what do they go to? It's, they cook and clean. They also do other stuff, and some of it better than you. But, yeah, that's the pat thing. Oh, well, your job, Anne's job in raising our family is so much more important than mine. Well, yeah, I'll give a nod to that because it's important to raise kids and stuff. But, it raises all sorts of issues like, okay, for instance, why then was your job remunerated in the way it was? Why did your compensation come to hundreds of millions of dollars, so much so that it didn't even fit in America? It had to be shopped out to the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and Switzerland and Panama and God knows where else. I'm surprised we haven't heard more about Gibraltar or is the Canary Islands, are they a tax shelter? I don't know. Malta, Hong Kong, why not? But yeah, so one, you would say, well, why is it that if her job was so much more important than your job, you got all the money? But more to Matt Iglesias' point, I think, would be saying, okay, if the most important thing in America is providing for children and raising them and putting food on the table, even if Anne didn't do it herself, she no doubt oversaw the putting of food on the table. And she probably did a lot of particularly in the early days, she probably did a lot of it. Probably. Or maybe not. Maybe she had help. I really don't know. And it doesn't matter because I'm willing to give some credit to people who oversee a household staff, if that's the case. Because that's not easy either. It's easier than doing all the work yourself, probably. But I'm not a good supervisor. I don't like giving people orders. It's a tough thing to do. But whatever. That's not it. The point is that if that's the most important thing in the world, and she gets paid nothing for it, and you're making hundreds of $millions of dollars, and the way you're making hundreds of millions of dollars is making it infinitely more difficult for other people to put food on their table and keep it there for the kids and raise their families, what kind of a jerk ass are you? You are a huge jerk ass. That is the answer. The guy makes his money by farming out misery to other people's families. The big message, the big thing last night of humanizing Mitt Romney, they did a good job of it. But the underlying message, if you're a cynic like me and you're going to pierce the veil here, is what I learned about Mitt Romney was that if you have a personal tragedy in your life or you're facing some personal difficulty and you happen to be a co-parishioner of Mitt Romney's, if you happen to know the guy personally, you're golden. But there is nothing new about the message that if you're having personal difficulties and you have a fabulously wealthy friend, you're going to be okay. But that's actually the Republican message, is that you need to cultivate fabulously wealthy friends, or at least friends who are willing to give their money to you. Even if they're not wealthy at all, they'll give up something and give it to you personally. But the idea that we ought to collect something from everybody in order to have a rainy day fund for people who are in trouble, even though Mitt Romney's, all the surrogates speaking for him, particularly the people from the Massachusetts state government, made a big deal out of the fact that he did, in fact, collect a little bit of money from everybody and create a rainy day fund. But the idea of doing that on a federal level, well, that's crazy. And that's another one of the stupid, crazy, insupportable dichotomies. I mean, I say this, but I know what the conservative response to it is. But I'll get to that in a minute. But the idea that you could take some money from everybody and say, let's have a rainy day fund because we don't know what's going to happen. Some stuff is beyond our control. There may be a volcano. That's why we monitor it, Bobby Jindal, from the state that doesn't exist but for American Army Corps of Engineers. And, it's an engineered city, New Orleans. You can wipe it off the map, but for our collecting a little bit from everybody and saying that city deserves to live. The people in there deserve not to drown. And even the wealthy property owners in there deserve not to have their properties destroyed if we can prevent it. That's the sort of thing that we do. You're a generous guy. Every time, or for all I know, somebody near and dear to you had a tremendous personal problem, you were willing to step in. What do those of us who don't have a Mitt Romney in our lives do? Well, you say sink or swim. Now, it may be that members of my community are willing to step up, but I don't necessarily have the reach as an individual to say, let's say, God forbid, someone in my family has some terrible medical situation. I have to deal with that. There's enough to deal with just getting that person medical treatment. But forget about it if you also have to add on top of it, I have to battle the insurance company for every payment for every aspirin they need while they're in the hospital. Not to mention the fact that the bills are mounting faster than anybody normal can pay them. And you got to fight with your insurance company. You got to fight with the hospital. Give them this treatment. Oh, I can't because it's not authorized. You got to fight with everybody. And that takes all your energy away from fighting the illness that you're supposed to be doing. All the time you're supposed to be spending praying for somebody's health is taken up by talking to insurance company bureaucrats instead. That's no good. But if you happen to know Mitt Romney, well, he'll come and babysit your kids. That's terrific. But what if you don't? What if? Well, how about a rainy day fund? Well, I don't know. You created one in Massachusetts. It seemed awesome at the time, and you certainly like it now, but you can't have it at the federal level. And again, I said that I knew what the conservatives were going to say to that, and they have this thing in their minds that what the founding fathers really meant was that each state, on a state level, you can do that. The states are empowered. under the Constitution to collect that, but the federal government doesn't. We want to weaken the federal government. And there's an argument, I guess, to be made for that. But of course there was an argument at the time against that. And the guy who made it was Alexander Hamilton and basically everybody else who wrote the Federalist Papers. But yes, they wanted to divvy things up a little bit. And yeah, it's possible that you can carry things too far, just like today's modern quote-unquote conservatives carry all the things they like too far. Like, for instance, the point of religious liberty is that it includes the liberty to try to shove my religion down your throat and make it public policy. Right? I mean, that's just an idiotic overextension and perversion of what it was supposed to be. Everybody's just supposed to be able to do their own thing. And yeah, there's some inherent contradictions. Like, if I believe in a religion that says that all the rest of you are wrong and it's my job to save you from going to hell by enforcing the dictates of my religion on the rest of you, and you say, but what about my rights to practice my religion? I say, well, no, you don't understand. The First Amendment says I have the right to practice my religion, and my religion says I am supposed to force my religion on you. And if you don't let me force my religion on you, then you're curtailing my religious liberty. Well, yes, I am. That's what that is really supposed to mean. But of course they think, no, there needs to be conscience clauses, etc. I have to be able to say, the rest of you have to be practicing Catholics, no matter what your religion is. Call yourself what you want, but you better practice Catholicism. And if you don't, I'll make the government make you practice Catholicism. That's their idea of religious liberty. That's not it. It's backwards. You've got it wrong. James Madison thought, at the time, contemporaneously with the framing, that the separation between church and state had to be even more severe. He was upset and tried to block the chartering of churches inside of the District of Columbia in his day. He thought that in the federal city there shouldn't be any. I mean, people want to go to church, yes, and he wasn't going to de-charter anybody that was already there, but his idea was, get in a horse and go to Virginia, go to Maryland. That's where the churches are. This is the federal city. I don't know. I think that they had some different ideas. Similarly, issues of taxation, where they think, like you need an exemption from the conscience clause exemptions from abortion. You can't take my tax money and use it on things I disagree with. And yet, at the same time, it's okay to do that for things like war, even though there are actual religions that, without twisting them so much, it would be fair to say they oppose war in just about all cases. They're pacifist. And yet, those people don't get a conscience clause exception when it comes to collecting taxation for war efforts. And somebody asked Ralph Reed, of all people, directly about this. I have an article open. We might as well get to that, right? Why not? Although, now would probably be a good time to point out, you're listening to Daily Coast Radio. This is Kagro in the morning. This is one of the things we got to get better at. I need a big clock. I need an alarm. That's what I have to do. I have to set alarms and say at 10 minutes after the hour and half past the hour and 10 minutes to the hour, you're going to stop and say, this is Daily Coast Radio. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show. I'm David Waldman. Kagro X, that's who you're talking to, or that's the person who's talking to the empty chair right now. And you're listening to our analysis of what went on last night, although we've now diverged from that to some extent. But there is a nice article up on rightwingwatch.org about Ralph Reed's distinction without a difference between conscience clauses for abortion and conscience clauses for war. And basically what it comes down to is, he says, basically, we allow the exception for conscience clauses when it comes to war because, period. That's basically it. Well, we allow for an exception in draft laws, conscientious and religious objectors. You can get out of the draft as a religious objector. But, of course, that's not what the question was. The question was, well, what about taxation? How come I can't demand a tax exemption for having to pay for war if I don't believe in it? And of course the answer is because everybody would claim they were against war. everybody would say they want that money back. And that's one of the reasons that we do things like tax people for things. I know they all think, well, you should be giving to charity. If you want to take care of people, you should be making personal contributions to charity. Like, watch me. I'm Mitt Romney. I babysat some of these kids. And I don't mean to belittle that. I mean, that was a huge contribution to that family's life. To say, I'll help you. I'll take care of your kids so that you can concentrate on the family members who need your help. But that's really what it's all about, too. I mean, just take it in a different context, right? Universal health care would go a long way towards helping with that. If you didn't have to worry about the cost of the health care, or at least if you didn't have to worry that you were going to have to battle insurance company executives every time someone who in your family was dying of terminal cancer and in terrible pain, and you had to say, I don't know if we should give them palliative medicine because that's expensive and it might not get approved. You're going to have to die in pain. I'm sorry. Unless I can battle the people for you. Although really, I don't know when you're going to pass. I would like to be at your bedside in case you do, rather than pressing 1 to speak to a live operator to make a claim. And now, if you're fabulously wealthy, I suppose you don't care what they charge you. So you're not distracted by things like that. Or if you have a fabulously wealthy friend who will take over your duties so that you can sit by the bedside of a sick relative, that's great. If you don't have that, apparently that's your fault. Either you're not rich enough, or you don't practice the right religion, or you're not giving enough to charity or involved in the right kind of church so that people will come and help you. But you're not supposed to be alone in life if things go badly for you. If we can help it, and we can help it. New Orleans is not supposed to be alone in life and build its own levees. We're supposed to help it. The red states in this country, we've pointed this out a number of times. I haven't, but lots of people have. Tax money flows out of blue and into red. And it's okay. It's angering when we hear your red state rhetoric about how the opposite is true. It's always angering to hear something when the opposite is true. You want to hear what's true. But tax money has been flowing from blue to red all the time, and basically we're okay with it because you're people, you're Americans, we know you'll help us if necessary in the future. Maybe you'll join the armed services and protect us all. Maybe you will invent something fantastic and we'll all benefit from it. Maybe you will grow some delicious crops and we will eat them. Maybe it's the cotton in our shirts. The touch, the feel of cotton. That's you, South, right? Maybe it'll be the corn that's on the table or in my gas tank, for all I know. You're probably going to do something and do something well. And even if you don't, you deserve a crack at it. It's okay. It's pennies on the dollar. I'm all right with it. It's the other guys who are actually taking all the money who say they're not all right with it. Don't worry about it. Charity will take care of it. Maybe it will. But what if it doesn't? That's all I'm saying is what if. And that's reality basing for you. What if? Plan for stuff. And there's also stuff that no charity is going to take care of it. Well, let's see. I think maybe we shouldn't build a rocket to the moon or build strategic missile defense. I don't think we should, but let's say you're into that, right? Or a battleship, a nuclear submarine. Who's going to build that? Well, if I have a really rich friend, maybe he'll build a nuclear submarine. No, he won't. Well, we don't have that much trouble with Republicans and conservatives saying, let's all pool our money when it comes to defense. So maybe that's disingenuous. But the Grand Coulee Dam, the Hoover Dam, levees in New Orleans, price supports for critical crops, not dumbass crops, critical ones. Not studies of stupid stuff, right? Studies of smart stuff. Of course, that's what the pork busters all say they're doing. But hey, there has to be a decision process and you leave it up to the experts. And sometimes stuff that sounds dumb is smarter than you think on the inside. But the point is that there are a lot of things that charity won't take care of. That no matter who's in my church, I'm not going to find anybody to donate the money to do research on this possible cancer drug. I'm not. I might find investors, yes. But of course, that'll only drive the costs of getting that drug up, because people will, of course, be looking for a return on their investment. Whereas if it's actually government-sponsored research, the return demand is not necessarily all that high. Maybe you get a nice guy like Jonas Salk, who doesn't bother patenting the polio vaccine. Right? Why not? Well, charity could have done that. No, it couldn't have. There's lots of people donating to charities, true, to try and fund research into various diseases. That's undoubted. I mean, there's telethons and other fundraisers all over the place. Marches of dimes, for instance. Donations to the Red Cross. People do donate money, but that's not enough. And it's not necessarily reliable, and it's not necessarily sustainable, and it doesn't necessarily mean the right stuff is going to get done. If you want certainty, right, isn't that the big complaint? The small business mantra that was so prevalent in this Republican convention. Even when they talked to random small business, well, carefully selected probably, small business people behind the stages. You remember some of those interviews that went on? Maybe you didn't see them. If you didn't watch on C-SPAN, you might not have seen them all. But that's a common Republican complaint, that we need to have certainty. And uncertainty means a lack of investment in small business, and that means bad things. It means we don't get our entitlement to small business success, which seems to be a growing theme among Republicans. Well, part of the reason you collect money from everybody and hold it in trust for everybody in some central way, as distasteful as that is to Randians, is the predictability factor. And the federal government, which has the ability to borrow to sustain this spending, if necessary, provides that certainty. It is much harder to, let's say, research and look for a cure for multiple sclerosis, let's say, at random, if you're having to wait to find out how many quarters and nickels and dimes you're collecting in countertops across America, or waiting for tax time for people to go ahead and make those contributions at the end of the tax year so that they get their refund quickly and they get their money back. I mean, some people are more generous than others. Some people can extend themselves year round, but having a steadier flow of money that you can depend on probably produces better research than let's see what we can collect if we pass the hat. Don't you think? I think pressed on it, they would say yes. But I know that there are zealots who would say, so what? You have to depend on personal charity anyway, and if you can't get people to be consistent with it, well, that's your problem, etc., etc. But it's not reality. It doesn't have anything to do with how you really have to do this stuff in order to get it done. But things so rarely do. Well, I've gotten away from the convention. That's true. And maybe that's a good thing. We shouldn't be concentrating exclusively on the convention, but there sure was a lot that went on. But, it's hard to talk about anything but the chair. It really is. It was a ridiculous end, and deservedly so. I don't know. Maybe we'll return to that. Let's take a short break and think about how we want to wind things up. It is Friday. That means we're at the end of the week. We've already lost track of what week it is. Is it 10? Is it 11? I've been waiting for the day when I finally lost track so that I could stop thinking about this stuff. But as I mentioned with Greg and told some of the callers, we are going down to Charlotte, Armando and I, and practically no one else, as it turns out. There are a few other Daily Coast names who will be down there, and I think there are a lot of bloggers from other places that I will have to look forward to seeing. I was going to try and lean more heavily on Daily Coast personalities for broadcasting, particularly from the People, the PPL, which I don't know what it actually stands for, but they're calling it the People, and which is the blogging space, the equivalent, the successor to the Big Tent from Denver. But there are going to be a lot less Daily Coast faces down there than I originally thought, which will count. Let's say we'll turn it into a positive, because that means we can reach out, bring some other voices in, and generally have a good time with some people that I like a lot and that I see at Netroots Nation an awful lot, but rarely get a chance to see outside of that context. Not that the context is going to be that much different. Anyway, let's play a break and enjoy that, And, we'll throw in a couple extra things. We'll get back to the convention. Maybe we'll get back to some calls. Everybody get ready to call me after the break, 617-500-7147, extension 14. Skype to Fans FM. We've never had anybody do that yet. And tweet me, write me, let me know what's on your mind. We'll spend the end of the pre-Labor Day Friday together after this.
If we are not stopped, we will gay marry everyone. Daily Coast Radio.
On netrootsradio.com.
What would happen if you didn't follow the established path? If you did the unexpected? Would you feel scared? Proud? Relieved? Could you explain that helping the people of Peru improve their own community would also have an effect on your own? Or assisting an entrepreneur in Ukraine to launch her small business? Or creating a support group in Malawi for children orphaned by AIDS? What if you established your own path? One that others might follow? Would you rather make your own way? Or spend your life saying, what if? Life is calling. How far will you go? Peace Corps. To find out more, call 1-800-424-8580 or go to peacecorps.gov.
Mitt Romney has a plan to fix the economy. He has a plan to reform immigration. A plan to end the health care law he designed. Mitt Romney has lots of plans for America, but he won't tell us what they are. We'll just have to trust him. Do you trust him?
The Great Orange Satan. Daily Coast Radio.
On netrootsradio.com.
See, I told you that was going to be a short break. You're back now with us. Kagro in the Morning Show on Daily Coast Radio. Brought to you by Netroots Radio. And that's a great way to find us if you need to. If you haven't found us yet, what the hell are you doing here? I don't know. I can't explain that. But like I said, it's like talking to an empty chair. You couldn't be listening to an empty chair. You're already here. But netrootsradio.com will jump you actually over to blogspot.netrootsradio.com, where the people who put this system that brings me to you on Shoutcast together. And we got a lot of sources of listeners now. Stitcher is doing great for us. We're finding a couple hundred people listening on Stitcher and downloading the show, and there's always, I'm surprised, there's a lot of listeners to older shows. So maybe that means we're actually doing a good job, and people are saying they're listening to the current show and saying, I think I'd like to hear some more of those. We're going to move the back catalog, that is, the archives of the show, over to Libsyn, our podcasting platform, and that means that we'll be automatically moving them over to Stitcher, too, and making more of our old shows available so you can look back and see how much worse we used to be, or maybe how much worse we're getting. I don't know. You'll have to tell me. Call me, 617-500-7147, and let me know. We have a caller on the line. See, it was magical. It worked. Let's unmute the caller. That just tells you you're on internet radio, right? Instead of saying, I'll pick up the phone, I'll unmute the caller. And here we go. Hi, caller. You are on the line. Who's calling, and where are you calling from?
Oh, this is Translator from the Bluegrass region.
Ah, hey, okay. How you doing? Translator, is that right?
Doing well. I beg your pardon?
Did you say translator?
A translator. I've been around for a long, long time, since 2005 late.
All right, excellent. Good to hear from you. And nice to hear about the username, so everyone who recognizes you is giving a little cheer at home now. So what's up? What's on your mind?
That. I really don't have anything in particular to say except that I wish you well on the radio venture. It sounds like it's doing well.
Yes, thanks very much. I rarely have anything in particular to say, too. But it's fun to try to come up with things. And I like the idea of just getting on and making conversation. I should probably, more people who do this are better prepared. They have specific agendas in mind. I am hopeful that more of this will be people calling in, people tweeting in, guests on the air, and just chatting, because that's kind of what I like about Daily Kos. And if Daily Kos was to have a radio presence, you'd think this is the way we'd want to do it.
Well, I will tell you this, Friday night, Popular Culture, which is one of my regular columns, is going to be the second side of Jethro Tull's seminal record, Aquilon.
All right.
And Sunday night, Pete the Geek is going to be all about oxygen.
Excellent. This is also a great feature, by the way, of people who have regular features on Daily Kos that other people follow. It's a great place to do sneak previews. I always thought this would be an awesome feature of the radio show if we could get people who are, whether it's front page writers or popular diarists, to come on and give people a sneak peek. I think that would be an exciting reason to listen and say, oh, I love that when that guy writes. I want to hear what's coming up over the weekend.
Well, that's very cool. I appreciate that very much. I don't do it for money, obviously. They don't pay me to write, but I love to communicate.
Me too. And there's not a lot coming in on this end from this work either. But I appreciate that. We all do this for our own reasons. And I like the idea of having an additional platform to do that. Hey, there's nothing better, I think, than having this available to other writers at Daily Kos who enjoy doing what they do anyway, to come on and say, hey, this is what I'm up to. If you haven't seen my work, or if you already have and you love it, check it out. This is coming up. No problem at all using this as a promotional platform. I'm glad you did.
Well, I'm glad it's not called diary pimping.
Right. Well, it's allowed. We do it, and self-promotion should not be shied away from, despite my problem with doing it for myself.
I do have one other thing to say, and I will not use any identifier, except those of you that read my pieces know that I love the girl. That's the term I use for her. And I just got to say it, I love the girl.
All right. Well, no better place. And I hope that went out to everybody listening. And it looks like we're growing by leaps and bounds here, so it's good news. We've got a couple hundred people on at any time, and hundreds more downloading the podcast. Apparently, that's just much more convenient. You can listen to it at any time you want, on demand, on Stitcher. So, great. Thanks for coming on, and hey, anytime. The phone lines are open. Thanks for taking advantage.
Well, thank you very much, and I will let you take up the calls now.
We'll see if any others come in.
Good morning.
Thanks, you too. Thanks for calling. I appreciate that.
I'm gonna sign up.
All right. Great. Very very nice of you to call in. Everybody can check that out, and those of you who've been following what he's been up to now have a sneak preview. I think that's a great way of handling those things. And it was always my intention to pull in more of the Daily Kos writers to do that. But as it turns out, morning's kind of a busy time for them. So guess what? That's an opportunity for you. Come on in, preview what's coming up. Maybe you've got a big diary plan, maybe nothing. Maybe you just want to call and chat. Maybe you just want to talk about an empty chair, or maybe you're tired of talking to the empty chair in your house. Call and talk to me. I can certainly imitate an empty chair if that's what you're after, but I think people maybe want to have a little more interaction than that. I don't know. I'm just guessing. You know who I'm missing today is David Neer, who I really need to just nail down doing a permanent segment with him. But maybe, I'm not sure whether his schedule really allows for it. And one of the things I'm finding that my schedule does not allow for is staying on top of scheduling things for other people. It's too bad. I wonder if he's around. If I checked in with the editorial group in there, I could see if there's anybody who wants to come on and talk. There's a bunch of people who have said that they would want to do that. I wonder, did anybody see the convention and want to talk about that? We could bring you on. And by all means, if you're sitting by the phone contemplating it, I don't know, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? You should do it. Pick up the phone. 617-500-7147, extension 14. You'll pop up on my screen. We'll talk. You can tell me what's on your mind. Very interesting night people still continue to talk about this stuff, and you can too. I don't know. This is an amazing story. Everybody, I'm checking the Twitter just to see the Twitter. What else is happening? And it's all still the chair. I will tell you about, there should be a Twitter index for the chair. I would love to know when that talk is going to die down. I mean, I'm sure Romney would like to know that before I do. But there is no indication that this is slowing down. Well, there's a number of one of the better functions of Twitter, at least in terms of dealing with them on live radio, if you can't actually monitor what's going on second to second, is it points out some great articles, and you're able to open these things up. I mentioned the Ralph Reed article. You should check that out. That is over at rightwingwatch.org, which is a publication of People for the American Way. So if you're a person and you like the American way and you would like to watch the right wing, that's the place to do it. rightwingwatch.org, and you're looking for Ralph Reed's Distinction Without a Difference. Now, there's also some great writing that has been put out over the last couple of days. Here's one from Rolling Stone Politics. The federal bailout that saved Mitt Romney. And why not? We should be talking about Bain and Company again. Why not? Romney did. Yesterday's attempt at rehabilitating the Bain name was also one of the more interesting aspects of the evening's programming. They clearly decided that they were going to run straight at that problem to address it, which personally is one of my favorite tactics. Whenever I used to work in advertising, and I still do some work in advertising occasionally, and I was always a big fan of when you are presented with a weakness, saying, let's run straight at it. Let's address it. People are talking about it. That's what people are talking about when they talk about our product. To evade it makes no sense, and it's seen through very easily. So they tried to go to the Bain issue yesterday, and, they put their best foot forward. There's nothing else that they could do. But those of us who have been following the story for longer know that there's another side to the story. And no one really could have heard those stories about people generating fantastic wealth. And they didn't talk very much about the amount of wealth. But thankfully, good prep work by Democrats leading up to this left people with the impression that there was more to the story, and they had already heard that side of the story, and so it was suspicious when it was left out. They didn't really go to the weaknesses. They talked about the strengths of a story that's one of their weaknesses. They don't dare go directly at the weakness. I got another caller on the line who will unmute and bring into the conversation. Hi, who's on the line, and where are you calling from?
This is Dave Von Ebers. I'm from Oak Park, Illinois, just outside of Chicago.
Hi, okay. How you doing?
I just wanted to say thanks for the shout-out about, although I missed it, but you mentioned a tweet of mine relative to the chair, the empty chair.
Yes, that's right. Thanks for calling in and thanking me for the shout-out. I'm sorry you missed it, but I'm glad you're on and listening now. It has that was a good one. That was pretty amazing. How did you come across that? Do you actually monitor what those Breitbart nuts say?
I don't offhand recall how I got it through Twitter, just looking through other things. But I've dueled with Mr. Nolte in the past.
Oh, okay.
Charade video and so forth, and he's a piece of work. And honestly, I was spending so much time on Twitter instead of working this morning. I don't recall exactly how I came across that one.
That's okay.
But I literally laughed out loud when I read it. I mean, he's kind of delusional.
Yeah.
They actually think that, and it's not just delusional, it's the sense of bravado that kills them.
Yeah.
That, if they just pretend that Clint Eastwood did a brilliant job last night, that, that'll somehow distract people from thinking that he kind of made a fool of himself.
Clap louder is basically the...
Exactly.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. And it's amazing that, now, of course, we're seeing the conversion. Like, I don't think Breitbart land was a huge Romney cheering section, up until, what the hell else are we going to do? This is the end of it. He's obviously been nominated, and this is the guy. And it's either, give up on unseating Obama or get behind this guy that we don't like very much. But yeah, they're now having to bend over backwards to come up with nonsense in support of somebody they don't particularly like, and I guess it's kind of transparent. So.
Right, and the thing that's also bizarre is that, if you look at the last several Republican nominees, it's usually the least crazy person who gets the nomination.
Yes.
You know, it's usually the person who's probably the closest to the center, as opposed to being way out on the right-wing fringe.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they get the nomination, instead of playing up their centrist credentials, they veer to the right. And I'm not sure why they think that's a good election strategy.
It used to be the opposite.
But, right. Right. Well, even George Bush in 2000 ran as the guy who could reach across the aisle and who worked with Democrats in Texas and all that. It may have been a farce, but at least he pretended when he was running for election that he was nonpartisan or bipartisan or whatever. Now these guys, you know, they get elected as the least, or they get nominated as the least crazy option, but then somehow that tells them that they have to be more crazy once the general election gets underway.
And it happens in the other direction, down ticket. The craziest, apparently, tend to get the nomination in a lot of these state-level and congressional seats, and then, I don't know, but they never actually make that tack back to the center. They think that exciting their base is the ticket to winning the election, and that means getting crazier and crazier as the election goes on. It's weird.
If like with Romney and McCain before him, if they get the nomination because they're not as extreme, what would they think that once they've gotten the nomination they should be? I mean, in other words, the way they persuade their own party to nominate them is because they're not that far to the right. I mean, at least that's how it appears. So it really is sort of counterintuitive that once you get it, if your own party is concerned, if the rank and file of your own party are concerned about the more right-wing extreme, then why would you play to that base once you get the... I mean, it just, I don't know, it's mystifying to me.
Well, it's very different. This is the new model for elections, and, you know, it used to be that you'd play to the base to get nominated and then tack to the center. And they did do that to a certain extent. I don't know whether they'll ever attack back to the center. Particularly, they've now been instructed, of course, they've learned from Karl Rove about what it means to try and run in what they call a base and turnout election. And apparently that means got to keep bringing the crazy. And I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of that was, I don't know, I wouldn't say it was taught to them by Sarah Palin, but she executed that strategy. Well, she stuck to the script on that strategy. It just didn't work. Now, why you don't throw that out, I don't know. But I guess Karl Rove and his guys still think there's some validity to that. And yet, then when you see somebody who's run to the base successfully, like Todd Akin in Missouri, and they freak out like, oh my God, the base is crazy. And now he's out there making assassination threats against Todd Akin.
Right.
Wow. All right. Well, there's some crazy mixed up kids out there, and they're running on the Republican ticket. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate your pointing that out.
Thank you.
Keep your eye out, because you're a good curator of the crazy, and we'll keep watching. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your call. Take care. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of nuts going on, and some of them are being thrown at camera people for CNN, as it turns out. You remember that story. Those people were ejected when the nuts get too crazy. The leadership starts to recoil. I mentioned Karl Rove. Apparently that was a big story out there on, I caught it on Twitter, and somebody pointed out that a Business Week reporter somehow gets herself, if I read the name correctly earlier, Sheila, wow, good God, why do we have to have these things? So Sheila Kolhatkar, good, you know, hey, call me Sheila, what can I tell you? I think I'm pronouncing that too. It's not the traditional spelling of Sheila, Sheeelah. And the last name, by the way, Kolhat, Kolhatkar, K-A-R, Kolhatkar. Don't know what kind of surname that is. Wish I was better at that stuff. Let me just say this, Matt Iglesias. I know how to pronounce that, everybody. That's one for me, and, 10 strikes against. Anyway, this is the coverage. Bloomberg Business Week. That's now Bloomberg Business Week. It's no longer just Business Week. It's Bloomberg Business Week. So let's all get up in Bloomberg's business this week. Exclusive. Inside Karl Rove's billionaire fundraiser. Well, you know, everybody kind of knows what goes on in those things, but here's a direct report. This is interesting, and even the setup is interesting. On the final morning of the Republican National Convention, Karl Rove took the stage at the Tampa Club to provide an exclusive breakfast briefing to about 70 of the Republican Party's highest-earning and most powerful donors. During the more than hour-long session, Rove explained to an audience dotted with hedge fund billionaires and investors, including John Paulson and Wilbur Ross, how his super PAC, American Crossroads, will persuade undecided voters in crucial swing states to vote against Barack Obama. He also detailed plans for Senate and House races and joked, quote, "We should sink Todd Akin. If he's found mysteriously murdered, don't look for my whereabouts." Okay, well, it's obviously a joke, I guess. Dun, dun, dun. And it's not even grammatically structured very well, but neither was that sentence, if you think about it. Don't look for my whereabouts. Yeah, don't, because you can't really look for my whereabouts. You could know. Don't look to find out my whereabouts. Don't look for me. Don't look for my whereabouts. You can look for my whereabouts all you want. I'll leave once you find them. It's not this chair. That's not my whereabouts. Anyway, the article goes on. Then Rove pleaded with his audience for more money. Much more. Of course, right? Fiscal conservatives always plead for more money. Much more. And of course, they'll differentiate that. Well, it's private money. They can do whatever they want with it. Yes, that's true. But it all comes from the same place. Money is fungible, etc., right? But that never applies to them. Nothing ever does. This rare look at the mechanics of super PAC fundraising and electoral strategy was likely not intended for reporters. I was invited as a guest of a financier who is a significant Republican donor. Financier, by the way. Excellent word. Let's not forget. Locust capitalist, vulture capitalist, vampire capitalist, whatever. Private equity, not a real thing. Financier. That's what they are. The financier knew that I was a journalist. At no point was I presented with, nor did I agree to, restrictions regarding the information I heard. Upon my arrival at the breakfast, I was not asked if I was a journalist. I gave my name, identified the person who had invited me, was handed a wristband, and ushered into the dining room. American Crossroads disputes this version of events, but a spokesman did not immediately return calls to elaborate. So there's a long justification, because this person anticipates being attacked for reporting facts, the factual truth about what happened in those things. They wanted to keep that hidden, and she wants to show, well, I didn't do anything wrong in order to get in there. I told them who I was, and I got in, and they admitted this stuff anyway. It's obviously a mistake. I'm sure they'd like to have that one back. But, yeah, I guess that's the planned attack on this person. Well, yes, you reported the truth, and yes, the truth is unsavory and disgusting, but didn't you fake your way in? Wasn't this essentially reporter fraud? Right? They're always worried about that. You didn't show a picture ID. Well, she probably did. I've got another caller on the line, but caller, hang on just a second. Don't go away. I'll be with you in just a second. Then came the main event. Rove, joined by former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour, laid out his strategy for winning the White House. The people we've got to win in this election, by and large, voted for Barack Obama, Rove said in a soothing, professorial tone, explaining why the campaign hadn't launched more pointed attacks on the president's character. Rove explained that Crossroads had conducted extensive focus groups and shared polling and focus group data with all the major groups that are playing in this election. As many of you know, one of the most important things about Crossroads is we don't try to do this alone. We have partners, he said, the Kochs, you name it. So coordination, but just not coordination with the campaign. Allegedly. It's coordination with everybody else, and that's all okay. Anyway, point is, he says that personal attacks like the president's a socialist or he's a far left winger, that doesn't really resonate with the people that they still need to persuade, that they need to be more measured about it, but also that they need more money to deliver that message and to really bombard these markets with advertising that's tuned to those people's needs in the last days of the election. And so, they're asking for money, more money, more money, more money. And Haley Barbour, the quote I thought was interesting from him was, he says something like, I have no qualms about asking you people for more money, more money, more money. But of course it's all private, so it's okay. In their world, it doesn't make a difference how you ask people for money. And there's some validity to that. These people are parting with their money voluntarily to do something that wouldn't be a function of government. That's true. That's all very good. But, it's interesting to me because Karl Rove's salary is paid out of this stuff. And of course, at some level he wants more, because if he takes a huge chunk of change out of it, the more money he gets for Crossroads, the less obvious it is, the smaller the percentage is that he's taking to pocket for himself. But that's the circles he moves in. Let's move over to the caller and see who's on the line. Unmute and say hi. Hello, caller. Who's this, and where are you calling from?
Good morning, Kagro. It's Jen Hayden.
Hi. Hey. Good calling. I thought you might want to call in, but then I saw that you missed the chair thing, and I thought, what could she possibly have to talk about if not the chair? There's got to be more in life than that.
Actually, we don't have a great connection, and I don't have a ton to add, but I think that we all woke up this morning and said, did that really happen last night?
Yes, people were asking, was I high or something? I have no idea. And I don't know. Or was he high? I guess it's possible. What do you make of this, or anything else for that matter?
Well, I thought it was pretty telling. I actually got up and like Armando, I watched the morning news shows for the first time in a while, and the coverage was just brutal. But more than that, I saw Ryan and Romney with their wives on the tarmac and bailing their new plane and getting ready to set out on their multi-state tour. And honestly, their body language just looked defeated. I don't know how else to put it.
Now that I didn't see.
But it was not good.
But yeah, okay, that's another interesting read on things. I mean, they must be exhausted, that's true. But still, there's this post-convention high to not to say that was what was going on the stage necessarily yesterday, but you're buoyed by these conventions, and if they look like they're setting out on a mission of doom, that's not very good. Bad news for them, and for them to do it.
You know what? I'm going to have to hang up and maybe call back. We have a terrible connection, and I'm having a hard time hearing you.
You know what? You want to try and use the Skype line? You got my Skype connection. You can call that rather than the call-in lines, and that usually works out better.
Okay, I'll try back.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks very much. It's good to have you checking in. And are others of you having difficulty with the phones? I notice that sometimes it's difficult to have a two-way conversation. Basically, I have to be quiet and let you talk if you're calling on the phones. But that's not the case with everybody so far as I have seen. So hopefully we'll get that straightened out. And we can have her back on because that would be nice. I'm lonely here, sitting here talking to these empty chairs. Let's see if I'm going to have to work this out. You know what? This would be a good time. Let's take a short break and let me engineer this up so that everything is cool. We'll just go to one of our short ones again. It's easy enough, isn't it? All right. Let's try that. And I'll be right back, and we'll get Jen back on because it's good to have other voices from Daily Kos on with me.
Ripping the stitches in Dick Cheney's new heart, if he had one. Daily Kos Radio. On networksradio.com.
Would it be crazy if you just stopped everything, packed your bags and left for a week, a month, a year? What if you left for 2 years? Would people think you'd lost your mind? What if you were going far away to help in a village on the edge of the Gobi Desert? A village crowded with Buddhist temples, not skyscrapers. A place where there isn't a word for recluse, but 1,000 words for community. Would it be crazy to go 5,000 miles from home? To spend time with people the rest of the world only reads about? To build libraries and fill them with stories? Prepare a meal with food you helped grow? To teach children and learn a thing or two about yourself? Would that be crazy? Peace Corps. Life is calling. How far will you go? To find out more, call 1-800-424-8580 or visit peacecorps.gov.
If you're a young worker, retirement probably seems like a lifetime away. In fact, you may wonder if your contributions to Social Security, deducted from your paycheck, actually cover you for anything right now. The answer? Yes, they do. By working in a job covered by Social Security, you're earning disability and survivor insurance protection, as well as retirement coverage. The time to learn about retirement and how much you may need to save for a comfortable one is now. Young workers, spring into action and learn more about your own retirement. A good way to start is by checking out the Retirement Estimator to get an instant, personalized estimate of your own future benefits. You'll find it at www.socialsecurity.gov/estimator. That web address again is www.socialsecurity.gov/estimator.
Ladies and gentlemen, the chief hope of our enemies is to divide the United States along racial and religious lines and thereby conquer us. Let's not spread prejudice. A divided America is a weak America. Through our behavior, we encourage the respect of our children and make them better neighbors to all races and religions. Remind them that being good neighbors has helped make our country great and kept her free. Thank you.
Mitt Romney has a plan to fix the economy. He has a plan to reform immigration. A plan to end the health care law he designed. Mitt Romney has lots of plans for America, but he won't tell us what they are. We'll just have to trust him. Do you trust him?
The Great Orange Satan. Billy Co's Radio.
On NetRootsRadio.com.
We are back, and we're in the last 15 minutes or so of the show. I'm going to see if we can't get Jen up and running on Skype. That is always a dependable way to get in. And, you know, I keep that as an escape hatch, a back door for folks from Daily Coast to jump in and get a nice connection. That's what I use when Greg wants to get on. So we'll try and rig that up for Jen and get her all hooked up. In the meantime, while I've got you, I want to remind you what's coming up next. As you know, Armando, not available today. So what's happening afterwards? Well, I'm going to hand it back to the Netroots Radio guys. After the Daily Coast Radio spot is through for the day, we'll just be doing these 2 hours. And we've got a documentary on reproductive rights subbing in for the Ministry of Truth show today. Why? Archbishop Dolan, as you know, Archbishop of New York, going to be giving the benediction, I guess, at both conventions. He spoke yesterday, did the closing prayer. He'll be doing the same for the Democrats, and that's caused controversy in and of itself. But it's happening, so it seems. So let's talk about that. We'll have that on. There's this documentary on reproductive rights, an important issue, should be on all of your minds, given the strength with which it is coming under attack from the other side. And then one of the homegrown shows of Netroots Radio, Kicking Ass, if you don't mind my saying. So Kicking Ass with Steve and Fripp follows. Fripp, I mention all the time. He's the one who engineered up all of these great intros, outros, and station IDs that I use all the time. Well, what's he sound like? What's he like? If you don't know, stay tuned, find out. He's got a lot of listeners who are loyal Netroots Radio listeners. But let's bring in some more. That's what the deal's supposed to be here. We're supposed to expand the audience by bringing my audience over to at least give them a chance, and we should do that. Why not? It's good radio. It's better than what you'll find on commercial radio. Then, of course, we'll turn this into commercial radio soon enough. I hope so. We've got enough listeners. We're going to have to start talking about that. That's what we'll be talking to folks maybe at the convention. That would be a good time to do that. You know, I don't mind. There's some good stuff we could be hawking out there. Anyway, well, we'll see whether Jen shows up or not. You know, using Skype, if you're not used to it, maybe the first or second time is not the easiest thing in the world. But Jen, if you're listening, you just send me a contact request once you find my Skype contact. And I don't give that out necessarily over the air just because things go crazy, or they can go crazy if the Skype connection gets filled up, let's say. And it's not as easy to engineer as the phones. And usually the phone thing goes well. I have to test whether or not we can have multiple callers over the phone system. Sometimes the sound is good, sometimes not. We've had better than others, and so we've had some conversations where there's no difficulty at all. hearing one another. Some conversations where Jen is not the first caller to have that happen, but luckily it happens less often than it could. Things could go wrong an awful lot more often than that. But so far so good. And if she calls in through Skype, we'll get a better connection. Let me bring you back, though, to the Rolling Stone. Was I looking at the Rolling Stone article when we last left? No, I don't think we were. We were looking at the Business Week, Bloomberg. That's right. Although really, I think we got to the basic point of that one. So we'll move on from there, and you can take a look at that Bloomberg Business Week, which you can find at businessweek.com. Inside Karl Rove's billionaire fundraiser. So yeah, he's out there begging for money to do these things. Okay, I see Jen has got things up. I'm going to accept the contact request, and she's online, and you can give me a call, and I'll put you on the air. Things will be great. Hilarity will ensue. I am certain of it. In the meantime, I will tell you all that the things you should be checking out over the weekend if you haven't seen them yet. Rolling Stone's article, The Federal Bailout That Saved Mitt Romney. Check that out. Subtitle tells you what you need to look for here. Government documents prove the candidate's mythology is just that. And that one reported by Tim Dickinson. So rollingstone.com, look for Tim Dickinson's article. Jen knocks on the door, and now you're in. And how's the sound now, Jen?
Good morning.
Good morning. Much better?
Much, much better.
Excellent. Well, we have that problem occasionally, but usually the phone lines are pretty good, which has been a real blessing because it's been great to have people calling in, especially people who don't necessarily comment a whole lot, so we don't get to hear their voice on Daily Kos, but then we get to hear it on the radio. Just kind of interesting to have this additional outlet there, and people who otherwise are maybe just staying silent on Daily Kos and get to be heard by the community for over this medium. So that's nice. But you're not silent, or at least not typically, unless you're overly busy. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just, trying to get enough coffee in me this morning and still cracking up about last night.
Yeah.
Just cracking up about the week in general. The whole convention was just a disaster for them.
It really was. And they can't manage stagecraft. Some of it was beyond their control. And of course, there are plenty who would say, well, stagecraft doesn't matter. What really matters is success in whatever, business, what have you, etc. But that's starting to come apart at the seams, too, although it turns out he's still rich, regardless. So there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, and it cracks me up that, Mitt Romney is such a great manager, and he turned around the Olympics, and, he built that all by himself. But, he was in charge of this convention. He couldn't even manage that.
Yes, well, I'm sure he farmed that out, as he probably did with most of the Olympics, too. But this is a very different prospect to say, we have to tightly manage 4 days. And by the way, I guess it was Michael Steele who made this decision way back when, but they did themselves no favors by scheduling their convention for the middle of hurricane season in one of the most hurricane-prone areas of the world. But
no doubt. I mean, we were worried about that when they announced Charlotte.
Yeah.
But at least Charlotte is not going to be as slammed by a hurricane as a place like Florida. I mean, not typically and not that far inland.
Right. It usually doesn't make that big. But, you get remnants usually of tropical depressions that come up the mountains after banging into the Gulf. If they make their way up, they'll trace that sort of inland route, but they're usually broken up into giant rainstorms by that point, by Charlotte anyway. But it's a real part of planning, and they really didn't do it.
No, especially after they bragged so much about the stage and the screens were cool, but I definitely wondered if those were meant to, show Mitt's different positions on every single.
Right. Here's Mitt shot from several different angles.
That's right.
And it mirrors his
thinks of abortion, and he could have 10 different stances for the 10 different screens.
Yeah, and they really have done that. And speaking of tightly managing message, which is also supposed to be one of the functions of this thing, I mean, I guess they had to do it, but what was it his sister was out saying, oh yeah, don't worry about abortion, he's really actually kind of pro-choice, he's not going to touch any of that stuff. while he's out there promising to reverse things.
Right. No, I think it was his sister that was out saying that. I mean, they're just, this is a campaign that seems to be spinning out of control. And, it's starting to look a little bit like 2008. And Ryan hasn't even really sat down and done any big interviews, outside of Fox News that I've seen.
Yeah, that's a parallel to 2008 too.
They seem to be keeping him, under wraps as much as they can. And it'll be interesting if he starts getting out there and people start really questioning him, especially after all this, the blatant lies that he told the other night, and the media finally, calling him out. I mean, the headlines yesterday were disastrous.
Yeah, bad news for him. And even when they wouldn't say lie, it was clear that things were like, I don't know. If you find that the big discussion point after your vice presidential nominee's speech is, well, what day did that plant close? After all, that's not a good thing.
Right. And I don't know if you saw it. I posted a link to a diary on Daily Kos last night. I posted on the Facebook page that, it turns out Ryan sent out a press release announcing, the closure of the plant 4 months before Obama was inaugurated.
Right. He forgot about that and slipped his mind, I guess. And then by the time, as the day wore on, there was more and more. There was the photo taken by workers at the plant holding up a big banner saying the last car off the assembly line and dated December 2008, which is, it's a little bit closer to the beginning of the Obama administration, but it's still not there. And those guys, he had a lot to say, Paul Ryan did, about his high school buddies who lost jobs at that plant when it closed. And I don't know, has anybody found any of them? I suppose they'd try their best to support his version of the story, but I wonder if his buddies or otherwise, people who lost their jobs at that plant, when do they think they lost their jobs?
Right. When did their paycheck stop coming?
Yeah. I think that would be determinative. And yeah, apparently there was a skeleton crew that was, I don't know what, removing desks and boarding up windows into 2009, and that's the sort of thin reed that they're clinging to say, well, see, Obama could have done this. But all the work, all the car building had ended in December of 2008. There wasn't really much you could do. Even from the transition team, you're not going to save this plant. And clinging to that thin reed at this point is kind of dumb. They probably should have cut their losses and run.
Well, it's like they don't know about Google.
Yeah.
And that we have this incredible tool, anybody does, to fact check.
Yeah.
And this stuff is so easy to find and just debunk, over and over again. I mean, more evidence, like you said, is coming out by the minute.
It is. It's pretty sad, and the easiest, not to belittle the way it was done, but apparently the easiest, if you measure by the number of people who did it, hit from the press after Ryan Singh was the top 5 lies in your address. I mean, it's insane to have to come out to that kind of press, but then don't do it. And also, I thought missing. I mean, he got a lucky break. The good news is he lied so much, people focused on that instead of the fact that Mr. Awesome Budget Wonk guy who knows everything there is to know about the budget and is going to save this whole thing by bringing him onto the ticket didn't have a damn thing to say about the budget he has and what's in it, except for, I think he made one mention where he said he was going to cap spending at 20% of GDP because, and what's the big wonkery here? Because that's enough. Thank you, Mr. Budget Wonk. That was great. I learned so much from your speech. What a disaster.
Well, the signage that they had in their theme, we built that,
yes.
Or we built it, or whatever
Right.
it was. I mean, the whole entire convention was just a total disaster. And the theme should have been, trust us. Just trust me.
Because that's all there was. Yeah, it was bad news. Then they had the positioning of the we built that underneath the debt clock, which also made for a great shot. Thanks very much for doing that. They should have put that at the opposite end of the hall. And everybody that they brought up to say we built it was on the SBA dole or taking stimulus money, which, I mean, it's like they wanted to shoot themselves in the foot, which is their Second Amendment right. So, after all, they can do that. All right. Well, Jen, thanks very much for calling. I will have to have you on again as often as you like. I have to wind this show up now. We're going to have to find a way to expand the programming day for Daily Coast Radio. My gears are turning. I wanted to talk to everybody about that at Charlotte, but now nobody's going. It's too bad. We're going to miss you terribly.
Well, reach out to me anytime, and good luck in Charlotte.
Thanks very much, and thanks for calling in, and thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm going to play that outro music and get myself out of here. It's Friday. Woo! Hey, screw you, everybody. The boss can shove it, right? That's the crazy radio way to end on a Friday. And we'll be back next week. We'll be on Tuesday. On Monday, maybe we'll have to make some arrangements for reruns, whatever, but all these shows are awesome. So, what's the difference? As long as we're bringing you the awesome, you're happy. I don't know. I'd rather have a live show, too. But that's the reality. I'm going to be driving down to Charlotte. And, whatever. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll bring you, hopefully, we'll hit you twice on Daily Coast Radio. Once in the middle of the day on Sirius XM. You'd think I was a professional at this point. But this is amateur. It's all amateur. This is amateur radio. It's ham radio. Maybe we need to move to shortwave. Anyway, I'm out of here. It's Friday. Stay tuned for this documentary on reproductive rights. No joke. I'm serious. You should be listening to that. Then Stephen Fripp afterwards. Kicking ass. You can't miss a show like that. I'll talk to you again next week from Charlotte.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.